November 16th, 1995, Hamilton, New Jersey. A vicious gang of local men terrorizes a small community. But Detective Carmen Salvatore and Prosecutor Brian McCauley will stop at nothing to catch a band of copycat killers.
As time went by, you started to see the turn from a robbery to a murder.
I think it made them feel more important than they really were. I think it gave them a sense of unity and belonging.
Joe is motivated by the movie GoodFellas.
They wanted to be just like the gangsters on television and in all the movies.
On the Hollywood screen, working for the mafia means you are respected and operate above the law.
In GoodFellas, when you're working for the mafia, you become a part of the family. At some level, you become untouchable.
But when one of Joe's men is suspected of turning on the rest, all hell breaks loose.
In GoodFellas, you never rat on your men, you never go against the family.
And when one gang member least suspects it, he will be silenced forever.
The cops had their eyes on this gang for a while. They knew these guys were a bad bunch, but they never suspected was that they were capable of doing something this horrifying.
Hollywood has a way of making even the most dangerous characters into on-screen heroes.
Movies like GoodFellas, The Godfather, and Casino glamorize the mafia lifestyle and what it's like to be a part of a large criminal organization.
People are fascinated by the mafia because the movies give us a viewpoint of how life might be within these criminal societies.
Especially for New Jersey brothers Joe and Bruce Post.
For the Post brothers and their friends, these movies seem to be role models for what these boys aspire to be as adults.
Detective Carmen Salvatore and Prosecutor Brian McCauley never thought they would go head-to-head with real-life gangsters, straight from the movies.
It was my job as a law enforcement officer, a detective, to investigate the matter and find the person who killed him, or persons who killed him. That was what I was trained to do, and that's what I did.
It was a roller coaster. There were days where I would just turn to my co-counsel and said, we're gonna lose this case.
In the mafia, looking out for the group comes first, but watch your back.
Like they say in the movie GoodFellas, your murderers come with smiles, they come as friends, and they come at a time when you need them the most.
As far back as anyone can remember, Bruce Post and his younger brother Joe have been the neighborhood bullies.
As juveniles, they started terrorizing some of the other kids, stealing their lunch money, bullying them, beating them up.
Although the brothers come from a good home, their actions say otherwise.
I believe the father and the mother either separated or divorced, but they grew up in a nice neighborhood.
Mother seemed like a regular suburban mom. I know she was very, very involved with the boys, and whenever they got in trouble, she was the first one to come to their defense.
To the outside world, the Post family would have been very ideal.
But within the neighborhood, they are monsters.
It starts with some beefs in the neighborhood. I remember there was a crossbow incident where they were shooting at other kids with a crossbow from a window. There was personal property destruction. Bruce was charged and convicted ultimately of aggravated assault for hitting someone with a tire iron.
And the boy's actions aren't the only thing that leaves neighbors terrified.
Bruce, at some point, developed an interest in World War II Nazi culture. He was known to walk around in the neighborhood in full SS regalia. And he did adopt the Hitler mustache, which, as we all know now, is not the most popular form of facial hair. I guess he was empowered by the fact that people were intimidated by him. I think that only fueled the fire for his threats and his behavior.
But Bruce isn't the only brother with a dangerous obsession.
Joe is fascinated by gangster movies. In the movies, the gangsters usually had power and control of their environment, money and women and fast cars. So there was a lot that you saw in the movies that seemed great.
At the time that Joe had his obsession, there was no bigger or more influential mob movie than GoodFellas.
GoodFellas, an Oscar-nominated film directed by the king of gangster movies, Martin Scorsese.
The main character is Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta. Young Henry is mesmerized by the mobster lifestyle.
Audiences watch as Henry goes from the son of poor working-class parents to an apprentice of a local mobster.
The only thing that young Henry wants when we meet him is to become a gangster.
Henry will do whatever it takes to be fully accepted by the mafia.
We watch Henry drop out of school and go straight into a life of crime.
The life of a mobster is everything to Henry.
The gangsters in his neighborhood are like rock stars that live on his block. He wants all of the money, the pretty women, and the respect that he sees come along with being a gangster.
New Jersey resident Joe Post is also attracted to the gangster lifestyle.
For years, Joe had been terrorizing his neighborhood, so he had a taste of what he thought it might be like to be a real gangster.
Joe wants to be respected and feared like Henry Hill in GoodFellas.
The only difference for Joe is he's intimidating people with his brother, but that's not a gang. A gang, you have a group of people to assist you when you intimidate with threats.
Joe knows he's a threat within his neighborhood, but by joining a gang, he'll become even more menacing. Like the mobsters in GoodFellas.
I believe that the concept of the movie, the loyalty factor of it, I do believe that it did have some impact on him. I believe that that just heightened his want to be involved in some way with the mafia.
Through his cousin, Michael Levering, Joe joins a local gang called the Pitbulls. Its members include other local men, such as Nick Migliaccio, Stephen Yeager, and Andrew Whited. Bruce Post's involvement is up for debate.
To this day, Bruce disputes that he was a member of the gang. He used to hang with them. They were his friends of his brother. He would associate with them, but whether he was a member of the gang is still in dispute.
He's definitely wearing blockbuster, right?
The Pitbulls, the reputation was that, and at least in the law enforcement community, it was that they were a pain in the neck.
A little dated term. What's up, man? What's your problem?
I think you don't belong.
No.
About that. You know what? I will pay.
Hey, do it. You can't kick me out. Come on, it doesn't matter.
They did some purse snatches, they did some small robberies. They wanted to create a problem. They wanted to rob money.
Around town, the pit bulls are known as racists and bullies.
I feel that Joe felt as though he could cause more damage as a part of the pit bulls. I feel as though that once he joined the pit bull gang, it was just a way for him to basically escalate his power, escalate his authority.
Like Henry Hill in GoodFellas, once Joe joins the pit bulls, he quickly rises up the ranks.
Founding members, a lot of them went to jail, and as they started to relinquish their position within the gang, these guys would fill in those positions. So I would say that Joe was probably a lead factor in the group.
Before long, police notice the gang's activity begins to change.
They started branching out. They got a better quality of goods. They were getting people who had more money on them, you know?
The level of violence was escalating each time, and I think that caused a small amount of police officers to be very concerned about these people.
With Joe at the helm, the pit bulls, once a gang of small-time criminals, are about to copy one of the most famous mobster movies of all time.
I do recall a Hamilton cop one time told me, because those guys are going to kill someone one day, and I laughed at him. I thought it was ridiculous, and turns out he was right.
Brothers Bruce and Joe Post have always been on the wrong side of the law.
These brothers have always been troublemakers and have always terrorized the neighborhood.
To their peers, the brothers are nothing more than bullies. But their reign of terror quickly escalates when Joe joins a local small-time criminal gang called the Pit Bulls.
It started with petty stuff, stealing, property damage, then they started using weapons, BB guns, crossbows. It was relentless. As soon as they would get it back on the street, they'd get in trouble for something else, and it would be for something worse.
Inspired by the gangster film GoodFellas, Joe wants to be a real-life mobster.
In the movie, the gangsters belong to something that's bigger than the law, and they demand respect and get whatever they want.
In GoodFellas, Ray Liotta's character, Henry Hill, starts working for the local mob as a young man.
Henry says in the movie that the lifestyle that the gangsters are living is better than any lifestyle that an honest man could live. Henry loves that the mobsters are part of something bigger. They're bigger than his hometown.
Bruce Post and his brother Joe have a similar outlook.
They started branching out, and they would rob people from affluent areas so they would have better merchandise.
In GoodFellas, after Henry Hill becomes a member of the mafia, he begins running his own profitable operation, selling cocaine.
Henry was selling a lot of drugs and making money faster than he could dream. We watch Henry change into a much more violent man. And by the end of the film, Henry is drug addicted and just totally broken due to the lifestyle that he's lived.
Joe and the Pit Bulls also develop an addiction to drugs. But instead of selling it to make a profit, they're using the money from their robberies to buy it.
Let me put it this way, if the pit bulls were selling drugs, they would be their #1 customer. I don't think they'd be very successful selling drugs.
The gang lives for the high.
Instead of going out and buying a bottle of vodka, they could, get a piece of rock, cocaine, and, they could all sit around and smoke it. It was fun. It was a better high. It was cheap.
But the more drugs they buy, the more money they need. And getting money means committing more crimes.
I would say the pit bulls were dangerous. They were dangerous because of the crimes they committed and how they just escalated. They became more violent, and becoming more violent and, you know, more aggressive, they liked it.
As one of the heads of the pit bulls, Joe feels unstoppable.
For Joe, being the leader must have been something he had always aspired to and brought him a great deal of pride, but also possibly some fears, because whenever you're on top, there's always others who want to gain where you are. And so there could have been some justified paranoia.
I'm in position 1.
And that paranoia is about to surface when one of the pit bulls, Andrew Whitehead, is arrested.
Andrew Whitehead was arrested for a narcotics offense.
Face. Don't move.
Got arrested for serving his sentence.
Throughout the movie GoodFellas, mobsters are constantly shuffled in and out of jail.
When Henry Hill first gets arrested, he's congratulated because it's almost the cost of doing business. Everybody goes through it, you'll be fine. And inside, you'll be very well taken care of.
But it's what he didn't do while in jail that secures Henry's spot in the mob.
The jail sentence is celebrated because of the fact that you did not snitch.
But in real life, the Pitbull gang isn't pleased with Andrew. It's not his arrest that scares Joe and the gang. It's Andrew's short sentence. Joe thinks there is a reason behind it.
How long is he in?
Just a month.
A month? Are you kidding me?
Andrew gets out of jail early.
You're not messing with me. A month. Just 1 month.
There were a number of reasons that could have happened.
That's ridiculous. Unless you talk to someone.
However, Joe assumed that Andrew had gotten released early because he had ratted on the gang's drug activity.
Joe knows the cops always have one eye on the pit bulls, and now he believes Andrew is working with the police.
Definitely the drugs were causing extreme paranoia, and it just, you know, substantiated when Andy was let out early. As they say, loose lips sink ships, and that is so true when it comes to criminal investigation.
Joe isn't willing to take any chances.
Joe labeled Andy a rat because he suspected that he was working with the federal authorities.
The gang can give you a set of friends, it can give you a structure and a direction, it can give you a sense of power and control and obviously money, but it can also give you ongoing paranoia.
And according to the gangster movies Joe has seen, there's only one way to deal with a rat.
We have to kill him. What do you want us to do? We have to get rid of him.
There's a hierarchy, and if you pick on someone who's higher than you and you rat them out to law enforcement, you're going to bring the weight of the entire organization down on you.
Come on!
Joe goes over his theory about Andrew with some of the gang.
The solution is to eliminate Andrew Whitehead as a witness. If you eliminate him, you don't have to worry about him If you go a guy is already testifying against one person, that's not a big step for him to testify against you. So it's basically solve the problem now. We don't have to worry about it later on.
Joe comes up with a plan to teach Andrew a lesson. He takes it straight out of the GoodFellas playbook. First, he'll throw Andrew a welcome home party.
When somebody goes to jail and they come home, all their friends get together. You know, that's kind of a, organized crime thing. You know, if you ever watched anything with the Gottis or the Sopranos, they took their time. They took care of the family while this person did their time. So it was like a celebration.
They'll have the party at Steven's apartment.
Steven had an apartment. None of these other guys had an apartment. You can't do that while you're hanging out at your parents' house.
They were gonna get him there, and that's when they were gonna stab him. Nobody had a gun, so they were gonna stab him. They wanted to kill him.
On the day of the party, Andrew is greeted at Steven's apartment by those he trusts the most.
It starts in the early afternoon, I think around 4 o'clock.
Good. Hey, can you have a beer, please? Yeah. Thank you.
It should be a normal, natural celebration that Andrew was released.
Well, you're out pretty quick. Cheers.
There's no reason for Andrew to be paranoid. He got out of jail early. He's excited.
Oh my.
Whitey was offered crack and alcohol. They have some beer, and they rented a couple of movies.
But Joe is ready to take care of business. He wants Andrew gone before anyone loses their nerve.
I think Andrew believed in his heart that this was a party for him. He was the guest of honor. And keep in mind also, you're coming from a situation where you've been in jail for a while. So creature comforts like watching a movie, having a beer, in this particular case, smoking crack, is something he wants to enjoy. And so I think to that end, he was enjoying himself and not able to see what was going to become.
They liked the scene in the GoodFellas movie where they went to Joe Pesci's mother's house to borrow a knife, and they end up opening up the trunk of the car, and the guy is still alive. So Joe Pesci in the movie starts stabbing the guy repeatedly, basically where the idea of stabbing Andrew Whited came from.
While Andrew is distracted, Joe prepares to kill his friend.
It's a scene straight out of a gangster movie, a twist that you never see coming. Whereas once they were in a tight gang and they would do anything for each other, now they've turned on one another.
Joe Post, one of the leaders of a gang called the Pitbulls, is about to commit his first murder against another member, Andrew Whited.
The Pitbulls were a group of friends who were fundamentally troublemakers. Joe Post believed that Andrew Whitehead was a snitch, and as such, he had to be taken care of.
For Joe, the underlying drive that was making him believe that Andrew had been a rat was his addiction to crack cocaine. It was exacerbating his paranoia.
So Joe comes up with a plan to silence Andrew forever. His motivation is straight out of the gangster movie, GoodFellas.
In GoodFellas, the advice that Robert De Niro's character gives to Henry Hill is never rat on the family and keep your mouth shut.
I remember when I went to see the movie The Godfather. As a 14-year-old boy, I wanted to be a mobster, you know? Thank God I went the other direction. I believe that the concept of the movie, the loyalty factor of it, I do believe that it did have some impact on him.
Right now, all the Pitbulls care about, Joe included, is getting rid of Andrew, who they believe ratted on them.
Throughout GoodFellas, mobsters that are thought to rat out the group are punished in the worst ways possible.
In GoodFellas, people are stabbed to death, shot, and beaten. All of the murders were pretty gruesome.
And one thing is for sure, the victim never sees it coming.
There's no honor among thieves because at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with crime, which has punishment, people are always going to look after themselves. And you never know someone else's conviction.
Andrew is about to meet a similar fate.
Well, it was Steve Yeager's apartment. They wanted to have the welcome home party so that they could kill him. That was their way to get Andy alone.
He was sitting down in a chair, and I believe they were watching Pulp Fiction. And all of a sudden, right out of the blue, Joe branches the dagger and starts his attack. Andrew Whitey was completely and utterly blindsided.
Andrew couldn't have known what was happening. After all, they're at a party, and they were celebrating, and they were drinking and taking drugs. His guard was down.
Andrew's bleeding profusely, but he's still alive.
Nicky Migliaccio has a knife. Michael Levering has a knife. Andy is struggling with Joe Post, and the fight's going pretty good. Where their actually arms are locked. And he had already stabbed Andy a few times. So at this point, he tells Nick Migliaccio, hurry up, stab him, stab him. Nicky Migliaccio at this point stabs him like 3-4 times in the back. And then he turns around, according to Bruce Post's statement, Andy turns around and facing Nicky Migliaccio. And he says to Nicky Migliaccio, why are you doing this? I love you, man. You're like my brother.
This had to be a pretty intense situation. Everyone knew what was about to happen, everyone except Andrew, of course.
Andrew searches for a way out, but he doesn't make it past Stephen's kitchen.
Ultimately, he was stabbed somewhere between 25 and 30 times. It was not a slow death by any stretch of the imagination. Joe was described as having stabbed him in the eye, saying, quote, do you know what it sounds like when you squish an eyeball, close quote.
After Andrew succumbs to his wounds, Joe feels like the ultimate gangster.
It really shows a complete and utter hatred of the victim. And I think at some level, Joe felt betrayed. And I think at some level, he was going to show everyone that he couldn't do what he believed Andrew was going to do.
But Joe's bloodbath is not done just yet.
He picks up Andy's hair, grabs Andy by the hair, lifts his head, and he tells Nicky to cut his throat. Nicky gets the knife, his knife that he's holding, and he says, this knife isn't cutting. So then Joe Post starts sawing at Andy's neck, at his throat with the knife.
Then Joe uses the knife on one of Andrew's tattoos.
They were just in the kitchen yelling and screaming. They're discussing, well, look, we have to try to hide his identity. Well, somebody says, well, you know, cut his tattoo off.
Joe crudely cuts off Andrew's tattoo in case police ever find his body.
Crime scene, it would have been a bloody mess. I don't think they thought that far ahead.
In Martin Scorsese's GoodFellas, after Joe Pesci's character brutally kills another mobster in a bar, His gangster friends are forced to help him get rid of the body.
Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Ray Liotta's characters drive a body that's in a trunk upstate in order to bury it.
They assume the body will never be found, but it's just a matter of time. In Stephen's apartment, the clock is also ticking as the pit bulls decide what to do with Andrew's body.
They ended up getting a blanket from one of the beds. They rolled him up in the blanket, and they told Michael Levering to bring the car up right outside the door to the apartment. And it was Nicky Migliaccio and Joe Post who brought the body down and stuck it in the trunk of Levering's car.
Joe and his cousin Michael decide to drive Andrew's body to a remote location and dump it, as they saw in GoodFellas.
This gang, the Pit Bulls, their reputation now had been escalated from doing, strong-arm robberies and purse snatches to murder now. So everything changed as far as, their identity as a gang.
But Joe is about to find out the devil is in the details.
In Joe's mind, no one's gonna snitch. We're all together in this gang, one for one, all for all. He doesn't realize it's sometimes not the gangsters who rat you out.
GoodFellas fan Joe Post has just savagely killed Andrew Whited, a member of his gang, the Pit Bulls.
Joe thought Andrew might be working with the police to rat him and the Pit Bulls out, so he killed him before Andrew could say anything else.
Inspired by the movie GoodFellas, Joe and his gang want to get rid of Andrew's body before anyone starts asking questions.
The two rules that we can take away from GoodFellas about the mob would be never rat on the family and keep your mouth shut.
But sometimes it's what's left at the crime scene that does the talking.
To be stabbed to death as many times as he was, and then stabbed in the eyes, and have tattoos skinned from your body, and then have somebody cut your throat, it's a pretty messy crime. It's very difficult to clean up a crime scene, especially when you have things like blood splatter and blood itself.
While Stephen and Bruce attempt to erase Andrew at the crime scene, Joe and Michael look for a place to dump the body, but they're running out of time.
Dude. We're running low on gas. No, we're running low on gas. We're not gonna make it.
Michael and Joe get into Michael's car, and the gas light goes on, so they're low on gas. They can't dispose of Andrew's body on an empty gas tank. And on top of that, they don't have money.
Do you have any cash on you? I have nothing. You got nothing. You got nothing on you.
Since they have a dead body in the trunk, that mindset of, oh my God, we don't have money, we're low on gas, what are you gonna do? And of course, at that point, panic must have set in, and they have to think, well, where can we go? What can we do?
In GoodFellas, Joe Pesci's character kills another mobster and is forced to dump the body upstate. But on the way, he makes a crucial stop.
They end up at Joe Pesci's mother's house. They are trying to borrow her shovel. It's late, so they're hoping that they can get into the house, get the shovel, get out without being seen. However, she catches them. And the mother's reaction is she's shocked to see them, but she totally buys their story, and then they have a nice dinner.
Similarly, Michael suggests stopping at his house to look for gas money. But there's one major risk. Michael lives at home with his mother.
We gotta get in there. We gotta stay quiet. We can't wake her. We can't wake her. We gotta. Yeah, we'll just get the cash. We'll get the cash and we'll go get gas.
Joe and Michael went to Michael's house to get money for gasoline because they didn't know how far they can go with the money they had. They were riding around with a body in the trunk of their car, and they got blood on them.
Just be quiet. I don't want Mom to get.
Inside Michael's house, Joe goes to clean up while Michael searches for gas money.
The mother of Michael Levering said that she hears a noise, goes downstairs, she sees Joe Post washing his hands and face in the sink.
Michael, what are you doing home so late? What happened to you? Are you okay?
She thought it was weird that at that time of night, he's standing in the sink washing his hands and face.
Are you sure you're okay?
Yeah, no, we're fine, we're fine. We just need money for gas.
At that point, Michael asks her for money for gas. She says no. Joe says, we'll pay you back, we just need the money. And she says, what's going on? Getting a vibe that something weird is happening. And Joe says, don't worry, Michael didn't do anything.
Mom, you just had a nosebleed, that's all.
Almost like a scene from the GoodFellas. They asked her for money, and she said, well, I have $5. That's all I'm going to give you.
Yeah, just a little bit of cash.
I think she relented because she loved her son. We're not asking for, like, I need about $2,000 to get out of town. Just need gas money.
I'll be back. I'll be home soon.
Be careful.
After getting gas, Joe and Michael find a place to dump Andrew's body.
They dragged him out to a spot they thought they could use to dig a grave and realized that the ground was frozen solid and they couldn't dig a grave, so in a complete panic, they just covered the body with leaves and went home.
At this point, they figure by the time they even identify this guy, they're never going to figure out who did this. They're going to just think that Andy came out of jail. He might have went out and bought drugs, and some drug dealers stabbed him and dumped him out down there.
The Pitbulls got rid of Andrew so he couldn't rat them out.
They didn't realize that any case is like building a home. You know, the foundation in the investigation, you know, and then you work up from there. The pieces of the puzzle start to come together for you. It all comes together.
Joe Post, one of the leaders of the Pitbulls, thinks his gang has just gotten away with murder, GoodFellas style.
Joe murdered his gang member, Andrew, because he thought Andrew was ratting him out and his gang, the Pitbulls, to the police.
They like to mimic the actions in the movies, being, you know, the tough guy, you know, the person to take someone else out. They brought up the fact that they enjoyed watching GoodFellas.
As Henry Hill feels in the movie, Joe now believes he's a master criminal.
Ray Liotta's character feels like he's above the law. He's not gonna get caught, he's the smartest gangster that's ever lived, and he's a step ahead.
Weeks after the murder, the Pitbulls believe they are also in the clear.
In their minds, Andrew has ratted. And there's justification then in his killing. That's their code of conduct.
But that all changes when a driver spots something suspicious on the side of the road.
He pulled off to the side of the road. He walked onto the ramp and he went and looked, you know, at this object he thought he saw. And that's when he discovered the body. He called the state police and the state police responded.
Okay.
In Andrew's back pocket, authorities find a piece of paper that identifies him by name.
They found that he had a FTA warrant in his back pocket. An FTA warrant is a failure to appear. So basically all he was going to have to do was just appear in court the following day, and then it would have been rescheduled. So he had this in his back pocket, but the Post brothers, Nicky Biggs and Levering didn't know this.
Detectives launch an investigation into Andrew's murder. It's only a matter of time before they question those closest to Andrew, the members of his gang, the Pitbulls. Michael goes first.
Michael Cave, when he was being interrogated, he just let it out. Didn't take much.
Joe just like snapped, just like attacked him, just started wailing on him, stabbing him 20 times. He knew that he had to get rid of his tattoo, so he just cut it off.
One by one, the others also follow suit.
In the end, 4 people gave statements. I wouldn't call them confessions because in each of them they minimized their own conduct and identified the other 3 as the bad actors. So Bruce gave a statement.
Okay, I didn't do it. Joe did.
Nick Migliaccio gave a statement.
They said that they were gonna do stuff to me if I didn't help them, so I helped them, you know?
Mike Levering gave a statement. Steve Yeager gave a statement.
It was all Joe. I didn't do anything. It was just my buddy Joe. He did it. I don't know. Joe did what? He killed Andrew.
Joe Post never gave a statement.
Joe refused to talk, refused to confess, and just kept his mouth shut. That's what he learned from watching GoodFellas.
Between the statements from the pit bulls and evidence back at the crime scene, police don't need a confession, and they charge him with murder.
They actually tried to clean up. They used the mop. I believe they rinsed the mop out in the tub. We were able to pull stuff out of the drain. But what they failed to realize is that the blood splatter had actually gone all over the ceiling, and they never cleaned it. So we were able to cut out portions of the ceiling and take it.
The pit bulls are arrested and sent to stand trial.
Bruce pled guilty to hindering apprehension and tampering with evidence and got 5 years in prison. Nick Migliaccio pled to aggravated manslaughter and got 10 years in prison. Michael Levering pled to aggravated manslaughter and got 12 years. Steve Yeager pled to tampering and hindering. He had to serve a year in jail, and I believe he violated his probation by getting another arrest.
And as for Joe Post,
Joe was convicted of purposeful knowing murder. He was sentenced to life with a 30-year period of parole and eligibility.
throughout GoodFellas, Henry Hill seems like he'll never be caught. In the end, the FBI has been listening.
The FBI tapped Henry Hill's phone, and they had sufficient evidence to put him away, so that caused him to turn on the family and become an informant.
Henry testifies against everyone who once trusted him.
After he rats everyone out, Henry Hill enters the witness protection program and goes into hiding.
Joe Post promised to never rat on his gang. In the end, it was his paranoia that took him down for good.
Drugs will do that to you. Drugs will definitely make you paranoid, and I believe that the drugs had a lot to do with it. I also believe that Joe was going by what this organized crime figure was telling him, that Andy was cooperating with the federal authorities, and he needed to be silenced.
And now, unlike his favorite movie character, Henry Hill, Joe was behind bars. No second chance for a real-life murderer.